Hi, in this video we're going to look at some different array methods that we can use in JavaScript to modify arrays. So doing things like adding elements to an array or removing elements from an array or inserting elements into different parts of an array, things like that. So we'll start off with the push method. So what this does is appends or adds an element to the end of the array. All right, so I've got an array here already in my JavaScript code called users, which contains 4 elements. They're all strings and they're just different usernames. All right, so what I'm going to do to start off with is I'll use the push method to add a new user to the end of the array. So I can reference the array, which is called users, and then say .push, and then in brackets, the value that I want to add. So it's a string. I'm going to add a new user called Bob, and I'll say users.push Bob. Now to check that this user has been added, I can just console.log users, so I can see the array in the console if I go back and refresh the page after saving the code. And there we go, we can see now it has 5 elements and Bob is at the end there. Might just make that lowercase like all the others. All right, so that's the push method, which allows you to append values to the end of an array. You can actually append or push more than one element at a time. So what I could do is I could say I could add Bob, but I could also do something like this. I could say users.push. I could add Mary and Tom, and I could keep listing more names there if I wanted to, separated by commas. So you can add more than one parameter there. You can add more than one value to add more than one element in one go. So now if I have a look at the array in the console, I can see now there's 7 elements in that. And we don't need to log the whole array to the console. We could log an individual elements. So we can see there's 7 elements here, and indexing starts from 0. So Joe is index 0, Sally is index 1, Max is 2. So if we wanted to get the last value, which is Tom, we could say users and then index 6 in the square brackets there, and we see Tom. Okay, so that's the push method, which we can use to add elements to an array, either one at a time or several in one go. Another method is the pop method. So users.pop, and what this does is removes the last element from the array. So if I now log users, the whole array, to the console, we should see that Tom, after running that line of code, Tom doesn't exist anymore. So on the previous line of code, Tom was in the array when I logged that element to the console, but now after running this line of code here on line 11, this line of code here on line 9, and then displaying the users around the console, that element doesn't exist anymore. The last item, Tom, has now gone. So the pop method can remove the last element at the end of the array. Another method we can use is the shift method. So what the shift method does is it removes the first element and then shifts all the other elements down one place to a lower index. So for example, the first element in this array is Joe. So if I use the shift method, what will happen is Joe will be removed, but then all of these other values, so Sally, Max, Alice, and then Bob and Mary, they will be moved down one position or one index. So Sally will now be here in position 0, Max will be here in position 1, Alice will be here in position 2, and so on. All right, so we can do users.shift, and then we'll log that to the console again. And there we can see that now instead of 6 elements, there's now 5 after running that line of code, and Joe is now missing. It's been removed, and it starts from Sally and all the other elements following. All right, so that's the shift method. It removes the first element and shifts all the other existing elements down one place to a lower index. All right. There's another one called Unshift, which adds another element to the beginning of the array and then moves all the other ones forward. So I could say users.unshift, and in the brackets, the parentheses, I can add a new value. So I might add, say, Jim. Again, we'll just log that to the console to see what's happening, see the change in the array. And what this is going to do is it's going to add Jim to the beginning. So now when after saving the code, if I refresh, it should be Jim, Sally, Max, Alice, and so on. All right, there we go. So now it's back to 6 elements, but the first one is Jim, and then all the other existing elements have moved along to the right 1 position, increased by 1 index. So now let's say we wanted to delete an element from the array. We can use delete to remove an element from an array. But what this does is it leaves an empty spot or an undefined spot in the array. So let's say if we go back to our code, we have Sally here as the second item in the array. Let's say we want to remove Sally from this array. We can say delete users, and then in square brackets the index of Sally. So remember, indexing starts from 0, so Jim would be 0, Sally would be 1, so we say 1. And now if we log the array to the console again, this time if we refresh, we see the array is still, the rest of the array is intact, all the other items are in their existing position, but now index 1, so the second element in the array, is empty. And if we tried to log just users index 1, it's going to say undefined, all right, because it's empty. There's nothing in there. All right, so when we say delete, what that does is it does delete an element in the array, but then it leaves an empty or undefined gap. So we can use another method, which is splicing, and what that can do is it can be used to add elements to an array, but it can also be used in a smart way to remove elements without leaving gaps. So to add elements, we'll do this. We'd say users.splice, right? And then there's a few parameters that we have to specify. So firstly, we say the position where new elements should be added. So let's say we want to add elements from index position 2. All right, we'd say 2 and then a comma. And then we specify how many elements we want to remove, which in this case, if we want to add an element or some elements, we'd say 0. And then another comma, and then we specify the elements that we want to add. So let's say we want to add a new user called Sam. We would just do that. But we could add more commas and keep specifying more users or more values if we wanted to. So I might add 2. I'm going to add Sam and Sarah from index position 0. And then I'll log that to the console. Let's have a look at what the users array looks like now. So we still had that empty value from before, the one that Sally that was deleted. But now we can see from index position 2, so remember Jim is 0, the empty one is in index 1, Sam is in position 2, Sarah is in position 3, and then Max is in position 4, and so on. So we can see Sam and Sarah have been inserted into the array here from index 2. There's been 2 new values that have been added, and then the other existing values that were there follow after, and they've all been pushed down 2 positions in the array. Okay, so that's how to use Splice to add elements to an array. We can also use Splice to remove elements from an array. We just change the parameters a little bit. So what we do is we'd say users.splice, but in the brackets this time we just specified 2 parameters. The first one is where the element should be removed. So let's say we want to remove that empty one there. We don't want that to be there anymore. Okay, so that's in position 1. So we would say 1 for the index. That's the position where the elements are going to be removed. And then we specify how many elements we want to remove. In this case, we just want to just remove 1 element. But if we wanted to remove a few, we could say 2 or 3 or something else. All right, this is going to remove 1 element from index position 1. So the first parameter is the position to remove from, and the second one is how many elements to remove. Let's log that. And now we should see the empty one is gone. So now it's Jim, Sam, Sarah, and so on, rather than Jim, empty, Sam, Sarah, and so on. So that empty one in index position 1 has now been removed. Okay, so that's how you can remove elements from an array without leaving a gap. And no other parameters are required there because we're not adding anything, we're just removing. All right. Lastly, what we'll look at is concatenating arrays. So that's where we can join two arrays together. So let's say we create another array called users2, and we'll just add a few values to that. So I don't know, I can say Billy. Oops, we need our square brackets. Say Billy, and maybe I don't know, Mandy, and who else haven't we got? Tim. All right, so I've got a few new users here. So we've got our original users array, which we've added values to. We've removed some and changed some, but we can also now take this second array called users2 and merge them together. So we're adding the second list of users onto the end of the first list of users. All right. So to do this, we need to create a new array because using the concatenation method, or concat, it doesn't change any of the existing arrays. It just returns a new one. All right. So we could maybe create a new array called all users. All right, which is equal to users dot concat, and then in brackets the array that we want to add on to the end of users, which is users2. So what this will do, remember, concatenation means to join. So if we're concatenating one array to another, it means we're joining them together. We're taking the users array, and then on the end of that users array, we're adding all the elements from the users2 array. If we wanted, we can have more parameters here. So if we had a third array called users3, we could also add that onto the end. So you can concatenate more than two arrays together in one go. You can concatenate several arrays at once. Now if I console.log all users, we should see a big list of users there. So we've got all the original ones from the first array, and then we've also got all the names from the second array, and it's now just one large array made up of two that were concatenated or joined together. All right, that's it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we're going to look at how to find the length of an array, which is going to come in handy later on when we start working with things like loops, which can be used to go through each item or each element in an array one by one and modify them or access them, do different things. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.